The contents of this interview, or from Awake and Empowered Expo LLC from Ethann Fox and Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, is for informational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the viewpoints held by these organizations or individuals. Always consult with your doctor or health professional before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, or prescription drug use. Please understand that you assume all responsibility and risk for the use or misuse of this information.
Welcome to another edition of Awake and Empowered Radio. Today I'm going to be speaking with Tom Paladino. Tom is a pioneer in the field of scalar energy and its use in enhancing human health, as well as the possibility of a clean, unlimited source of energy for use in our day-to-day lives. During this conversation, we discuss Tom's success in treating health conditions, as well as the implications of this energy in the future of our world. Thank you for joining me today, Tom. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you again. It's been a little while. I'd like to start out today with a little bit of background about you for people who may not know your background. So if you can share a bit about your history, your background, like what were you doing before you started this work? And especially, I'm really interested in any pivotal life moments that changed you or put you on the path of working with scalar energy. I know you said before that you believe that God gave you this idea to build these devices, and I'm not sure if you were someone who had that technical background or not beforehand, but if you can just kind of encompass all of that into how your life journey brought you to this point, that would be great.
Sure. Once again, thank you for the invite. It's great to be speaking to you again, Ethan. You're a scholar and a gentleman. Scalar energy. Well, what does scalar energy mean to me? Scalar energy is the paintbrush of God. Scalar energy is a direct manifestation from God. And what was a pivotal point in my life that I realized that scalar energy could change the world for the better? Well, as a youngster, I read about Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla inspired me. As many of you are familiar with this great scientist. Tesla essentially gave us the modern day age. He worked initially with AC electricity. Many of his inventions are still in use today. He really served, if you will, as my launching pad for a career in pursuit of scalar energy. So without exception, it was reading various books about Nikola Tesla when I was a youngster, as a teenager. And I had in my mind at that early age that if there was anything that I could do in any fashion to further the work of Nikola Tesla, that I would do that. Well, here I am today at age 54, and I think I'm on the very brink of being able to show that Tesla's work was of great merit. Sadly, we haven't paid attention to this incredible mind to the extent that we should. We've ignored Nikola Tesla too long, and I would like to revisit many of Tesla's discoveries and many of his inventions. In some way, I'm duplicating what Tesla achieved over 100 years ago. So with that said, it was Tesla who was really my launching pad. Throughout my life, I've pursued the scalar energy. I've thought about it. I've theorized. I've postulated as much as I could. And eventually I had to get really serious about this, and I had to start inventing instruments. I had to discover how to control and harness this energy. This has not been easy. This has been a laborious trek, if you will, to start with nothing but an idea, and from there to build from that idea and to arrive at a finished model, a working model of what Tesla would have called the wheelwork of nature. That's what scalar energy allows us to do, to find our way into the very essence of nature, the very wheelwork that controls the universe. Well, I am there today. I do have functioning scalar energy instruments that can harness, direct, control scalar energy. And my results, the results are quite sensational, quite phenomenal. And I would say this is going to be, again, the way that the world will be able to address so many problems and overcome problems by way of this new technology that's unfolding.
You mentioned that somehow these ideas were inspired by God or by some kind of divine intervention. Can you explain what that was like for you and give us a little bit more detail on that?
Sure. I'll go into detail about that. I'd be happy to. I was of the good fortune in 1993 to have met a monk. His name is Pablo Maria. I was visiting a monastery outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It was the monastery of Our Lady of the Holy Spirit. And I was approached by a monk by the name of Pablo Maria. And with that acquaintance, Pablo started to provide me with messages, locutions from both Jesus Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary. Well, that was wonderful, and I was quite astonished that I had been chosen to be the recipients of these messages. But nevertheless, I was obedient, and I learned, and I listened. And over the course of a year or so, I received thousands upon thousands of messages from our Lord and Our Lady. And many of those messages were instructive as to scalar energy. And God, in so many words, has asked me to introduce scalar energy to the world, that this is his divine energy, and he wishes to gift mankind with scalar energy. It's a tremendous gift from the infinite one. So with that, I had a clear-cut vision that I had been appointed by God to work with scalar energy and to do my best in order to introduce scalar energy to mankind. So I've made that my lifelong goal. And again, it hasn't been easy. It's been quite a trek. It's filled with ups and downs. But I can say I have finally arrived. I am to the point where I have functioning scalar energy instruments. They can control this divine energy. And in so doing, I can accomplish things that nobody else can accomplish unless you have a scalar energy instrument. What I am able to achieve by way of scalar energy, you cannot achieve by way of electricity. Now, very few people in the world that I recognize have understood scalar energy to the point that they can manufacture instruments and then understand how to use those scalar energy instruments to the benefit of mankind. You know, if you will, many times we look at invention. It starts obviously with the idea, the afflatus is first. But from that point forward, you have to move from theory to practice. And for centuries, we've thought about scalar energy. Scalar energy is chi or prana. Some people call it 0-point energy. Some people say our thoughts or intuition are scalar energy. All of that is true and accurate. But the key, the real test is you have to develop instruments that can control this energy in order to observe it, in order to perfect your technique, and in order to be able to demonstrate that, yes, this is a reality. So that's the key to my research. I have been blessed with the knowledge to fabricate, to invent instruments that control scalar energy, and then simply with experimentation, and some of that is trial and error, some of that is pure mysticism from God, I've been able to perfect my technique. In specific, I've been able to perfect the technique to work with human health, to improve human health by way of scalar energy.
Before we get too far into that part, which I do want to get into in depth, I want to, and you addressed some of this a second ago, but I want to set more of a foundation of what exactly scalar energy is and getting your thoughts on a few questions pertaining to that. Now, you already mentioned that scalar is chi and 0 point. So is that the same as etheric energy as well?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
okay.
Those are all synonymous terms. Yes.
Uh-huh. Have you heard about the morphogenic field or the noosphere? You
Yes.
probably have. Okay. So do you believe that scalar energy is just purely energy without intelligence or information, or does it have an innate intelligence that allows it to think for itself in some way?
It does have an innate intelligence. What I consider scalar energy is really a direct manifestation from God. And if something is coming directly from God, it has to be pure, holy, and intelligent. And that's what scalar energy is. It's pure, it's holy, it is indeed intelligent. So scalar energy, I could even go further and say that scalar energy represents the carrier information, the carrier wave for all intelligence of the universe. And what do I mean by that? Well, the stars of the universe produce scalar energy. Our sun of our solar system, the stars of the universe, are the points of origin of scalar energy. And that energy, that source of light is not only beautiful to look at and very aesthetically pleasing, but that light also carries information. So my contention is the entire universe receives its design, receives its instructions from scalar energy. Scalar energy, if you will, serves as the blueprints for mankind, the architectural plans for the entire universe. I firmly believe that before we do anything in the universe, we have to have this intelligence, which is scalar energy.
If that's true, that this energy is coming from the sun and the stars and so on, what is actually happening? I don't know if you know, but if you have a theory on what exactly is happening when we have a coronal mass ejection or like a solar flare that hits the Earth.
Sure. Any type of emanation from the sun, whether it's an aurora borealis or some type of coronal ejection, all of that is a manifestation of scalar energy. Now, it's been observed, and I can attest to this in my laboratory, and other scalar energy researchers have seen this in action. Scalar energy can convert into electromagnetic energy. Scalar energy can convert into electricity, magnetism, and vice versa. The electromagnetic energy field can convert into scalar. So anytime we see a projection of energy or light from the sun, that could be a combination of both scalar as well as electromagnetic energy. I will go on record by saying that our notion of the stars that we find in academia is really off the mark. Why? Well, a star is the point of origin of all scalar energy. At the very center of a star, you have a pure scalar energy force field. There's no electricity within the center of a star. At the very center, at the very core of every star of the universe, it's relatively benign, it's cool, it's hollow, and it's not anything like we understand today in academia. There is no thermonuclear reactions in the center of our stars. It is not hot, excessively hot in the center of our stars. To the contrary, the very center, the very core of our stars are cool. It is hollow. There is no thermonuclear reaction. There is no electricity or magnetism at the center, at the core of our stars. At the very center of our stars is a 100% scalar energy environment. That is the source of energy for the universe. That is the source of all intelligence for the universe. It comes from every star. It originates from every star. Now, scalar energy, once again, has the ability to convert from scalar into electromagnetic energy. And in many ways, once the energy originates from the stars at scalar, it will indeed convert into electromagnetic energy somewhere else in the universe. But it's crucial to understand scalar energy and its origin. Every star is a scalar energy generator. Every star is relatively cool inside. It is essentially hollow. It is nothing but a pure dimension of scalar energy. It is not of the electromagnetic energy dimension, and that really sets it apart from the rest of the universe. There are very few environments that are 100% scalar energy. The center of our stars is indeed that perfect environment. We don't have that perfect environment elsewhere in the universe. We have electromagnetic energy, which in my estimation is imperfect energy.
Do you believe the Earth is also a scalar instrument of some kind?
Yes, okay. I believe every object in the universe is incorporating scalar energy at every moment. It's just, if you want a perfect scalar energy environment, you have to go to the very center, the very core of our stars. That's the only environment that you'll find an unmitigated scalar energy environment. Nevertheless, scalar energy does pervade the universe, and it's in every square inch of the universe.
Now, obviously, you've got these scalar instruments that you use to transmit energy to heal people around the world. And what exactly is happening when we have a coronal mass ejection, when all of a sudden the Earth is being bombarded with an excessive amount of the scalar energy? Are people and the Earth as a whole being altered in some way, do you think, energetically or genetically or something like that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. In ways that are so profound that we could only scratch the surface right now. If scalar energy carries the instructions of the universe, then scalar energy is responsible for our DNA, for our cellular structure, for the planets, for our circadian rhythm, for everything. It gives intelligence to everything. In other words, every time we think, that's an expression of scalar energy. We could not think without scalar light, scalar energy. So scalar energy is the fundament. Scalar energy is responsible for all spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical activity in the universe. I firmly believe that, and I think I can demonstrate that by what I've observed in my laboratory. So with that said, any type of blast of energy, any type of solar flare would serve to send out intelligence, would serve to broadcast not only a great deal of heat and light, but what accompanies that is intelligence. Now, how is that information, how is that intelligence affecting us? I would say favorably. To what extent, I don't know. It's beyond my mortal mind, if you will.
Scalar, you said, is intelligent, and it's of God. So it has a positive intelligence. But is it possible to use scalar to harm people on the planet? I mean, does scalar have an inherent intelligence and consciousness that prevents it from allowing its use for that in that way?
Scalar energy is indeed a form of energy, and it can be used for either good or for evil. And I've always been very cautious about how I use my scalar energy instruments, and I have a profound respect for their capability. So, in a nutshell, scalar energy can be used for harm. Some people have extrapolated that perhaps scalar energy is being used by the governments around the world as a means of defense, as a weapon. I don't have proof of that, nor would I discount that. I simply say that that's not my bag. That's not my calling in life. But nevertheless, it commands a profound respect, and it commands a due diligence on our part. It's not a toy. We're actually working with the ability to alter physical forms. And when we're doing that, we have to be very careful what we're doing.
Now, you're a little bit familiar with my work as a healer, and I primarily focus my attention in the area of raising consciousness. But over the years, people who've worked with me have also experienced remarkable health benefits as well. And I've worked with aura readers locally who have been able to see the energy that's passing through my physical body to others in the room. I've also done aura photography to test and document the effects. I've come to the understanding that this energy is not actually of my body, but that my body has the ability to bring this energy in and project it to others who are in the room physically, or even people around the world by thinking about their name or a picture or whatever. Now, do you believe that this energy that I'm working with is also what you define as scalar energy?
Of course, by all means. It's my firm belief that people have the ability to control scalar energy. We all do to various degrees. Healers, people who have healing hands, are actually broadcasting scalar energy from their healing hands. We don't understand the universe as to the extent that we should. Once we admit that there's another type of energy, scalar energy, many of the mysteries that have been unexplained up until this point will now be rather simply explained, and we could easily elucidate as to why these things happen. Healing hands, people who have the ability to lay hands upon you and heal you, that's simply a transfer of scalar energy from their body into you. And those healing hands carry not only healing energy, but instructive energy, so that we can, take our healing hands and reprogram the mind, the body, the soul. That's what healing hands is all about. You're imparting this perfect life force energy, this source energy, scalar energy, into a person. And what's the benefit? Well, again, it will help people spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So let there no longer be any mystery about healing hands. Some people have healing hands, and that's simply the ability to broadcast scalar energy. It's as simple as that.
Now, I interviewed a Russian geneticist, Dr. Peter Gerayev, last year, and he shared with me an experiment that he did with plants where he transmitted words in different languages, English being one of them, Russian another one, I forget the other one, but to plants. And so as a control, he also transmitted gibberish to the plants. And so the plants that received language with intention actually experienced a genetic repair, and he was able to measure that there was a change in the genetics, and these plants healed. The plants originally, they were both the control and the experiment were unhealthy. So the ones that were transmitted, intelligence along with language, intention with language, experienced repair. When the control, the ones that were just spoken gibberish, did not experience any change whatsoever. So in essence, the plants were receiving genetic information by way of language, and he concluded that the language coupled with words, with an intention, or a thought, promotes transmission of genetic information, and certain words, such as swear words, he said, actually have a damaging effect on genes. So now, do you believe that this transmission of genetic information is somehow related to scalar energy, or do you have a theory on that?
Yes, I do. And to answer your question, yes. The spoken word is some type of scalar energy propagation, some type of scalar energy emanation. So yes, healing hands also broadcast scalar energies, but so we can likewise, with our voice, with our emotions, we can also broadcast scalar energy. And that scalar energy can be quite soothing, corrective, and health enhancing. I've always considered that a kind word does so much good to somebody. Well, why is that? What's the principle behind that? Well, it's a lot more than just uniting yourself with a person and complimenting them. You're actually broadcasting scalar energy to that person. A man and a woman that are in love, well, they're sharing scalar energy. And a lot of people can't understand that necessarily in the sense of science and energy, but you certainly can understand that romantically. There's some men that love their wives to the point that they're inseparable. Well, that's really a scalar energy bond, a uniting of two people and sharing not only love, but uniting in the physical sense of a scalar energy unity. Of course, by all means, our emotions are some type of broadcast, some type of manifestation of scalar energy. So if somebody were to speak kindly to a plant, and I've heard that these experiments have been done and conducted, and there is indeed a palatable, a noticeable difference. By speaking kindly to a plant or an animal, you enhance their life form, you enhance their constitution. That only makes sense. And the more we delve into scalar energy, we can see that, yes, that prayer, that thought, that emotion is scalar energy. And that any prayer, any thought, any emotion, when it's directed appropriately, is going to enhance life. That's the beauty of this. Everybody controls scalar energy. Everybody can pray, think, and say a kind word. Hence, everybody is a broadcaster, a beacon, if you will, of scalar energy that will improve the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional state of everybody around you. So it really does make sense to have a happy day, be nice and kind to others, do unto others as they would do unto you, and to spread the love. There's a lot of merit to that. You know, we want to be around happy people. Nobody wants to be negative in life, and nobody wants to be sad. So that's the point. Maybe I should call scalar energy the happy energy. Maybe that would really attract more people. There's a good thought. The happy energy. There you go.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't planning on asking this question, but one of the things that we're going to talk about in a bit is nutrition and diet and health and those kind of things. But one of the most consistent studies that have come out over the years is that even more than a proper diet and nutrition and exercise, a loving relationship, a relationship with somebody where you feel loved by that other person contributes more to longevity than if you eat well. And so you're kind of speaking to something like that right now. So in that context, would you say that if you're in an unloving relationship, or rather a relationship where you don't feel loved by the other person, even if that other person, or does it matter if the other person loves you but you don't feel it, is that energy still being transmitted? What do you think about that?
It is, but it's also incumbent upon the person that you're loving for them to accept that love. So it in no way detracts from you as the projector of love. If that person doesn't choose to accept your love and to harness that love, well, that's to their that's to their liability. It in no way should any way affect you adversely, and it in no way should dissuade you from showing love and kindness. Everybody has their free will to accept that or not. But that's a beautiful thing, I think, and that's a good point, Ethan. In no way, regardless of the response of mankind or the people around us, our family and friends, that should in no way dissuade us from doing what is right. And we just have to keep being ourselves and being good people. And most people will accept that because most people want to be happy.
I know you're a Christian, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm guessing that in the Christian belief system, obviously everybody has their own interpretation that's slightly different, but how do you resolve your beliefs in Christianity and still have this very technical understanding of scalar energy and equate that to what was going on in the Bible?
Sure. I find no contradiction. I find no conflict whatsoever with what I'm doing as a scientist with my belief as a Christian. Actually, they both corroborate and support one another. And sadly, too many people have made this artificial divide between science and religion. There is no divide. They're both the same. Some people can look at nature from a spiritual standpoint. That's fine. Some people can look at nature more or less from a scientific standpoint, but they both point to the Creator. And God has an infinite number of facets about him. God has an infinite number of attributes. So to appreciate nature spiritually is wonderful. To appreciate nature from a scientific perspective is good and holy also. But anytime we have the clash of these two different ways of looking at nature, it's false. You're contradicting yourself. God doesn't contradict himself. Man contradicts himself. If God created the spiritual realm, then he also created the scientific realm. And he's not going to have a clash there. It's simply people don't understand that they're both really of the same fabric. The demarcation line is false. There is no divide between religion and science. It's the same.
Do you believe that the stories about Jesus in the Bible are to be taken literally in the sense that he performed mass healings and he performed manifested things out of
Yes.
the ethers, basically? And how do you explain those things from a technical standpoint?
Sure. That's a good point. One of the messages I received from Jesus is that the account when a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years, she actually touched his cloak. And Jesus says, "Who touched me? Power has gone out from me." Well, what was he referring to? He was referring to scalar power. And that intelligence, that healing power, that scalar power healed the woman of a hemorrhage. She was hemorrhaging again for a long period of time. Well, that's an example of Jesus imparting scalar energy upon somebody. Now, do I have a problem with that? No. God works with nature. He doesn't work against nature. If God created scalar energy, he's going to work with it. He's not going to work against it. So the account in the Bible where God was touched by a woman and the woman was instantly cured. And the remark that God made was that, "Who touched me? Power has gone from me." Well, that's all a sign that, yes, God is controlling scalar energy. And when he bequeaths that scalar energy to somebody can be cured.
Okay, so I'd like to get a little more technical about scalar energy. Now, you mentioned earlier that scalar and electromagnetic are the two forms of energy, and we primarily are utilizing electromagnetic in our everyday world. Now, you said that scalar is by far more versatile and that the energy exists in abundance in the universe, and if we just were able to tap into it, we would have an unlimited source of free energy. Basically, this was what Nikola Tesla was working on as well, as you mentioned. And more recently, other scientists and researchers such as yourself as well, like Dr. Shipov we had last year, was also working in that field. Now, what I'm curious about really is what is the difference between scalar and electromagnetic, which we use to power our homes and so on, and why is it that electromagnetic fields have been found to disrupt the body's energy field and cause cancers and other illnesses, while you're using scalar to heal illness? Can you explain these two energies, how they function on the body so differently?
Yeah, by all means. And it's very simple. Scalar energy is a double helix. If you can picture two corkscrews that are intertwined, that serves as the scalar energy model. Now, when scalar energy decouples, then the corkscrew, if you will, decouples, and one corkscrew becomes electricity and the other becomes magnetism. And those two run parallel. Those two have a perpendicular relationship, which is really a resistance by definition. So what's the point? When you have a perfect double helix, this perfect scalar wave, that's perfection, and you will only have life. There can be no introduction of entropy or no introduction, if you will, of death or decay. To the contrary, when scalar energy decouples and manifests as electromagnetic energy, electricity and magnetism do experience entropy. Hence, death enters into the picture. Decay enters into the picture. Disease enters into the picture. So, in synopsis, scalar energy is perfect energy. It's perpetual energy. There's no entropy. There's no loss of signal. There's no degradation. It is perpetual energy. It's perpetual life. There's no disease. When you remove yourself from that perfect paradigm into electricity, which is magnetism and electricity, the electromagnetic spectrum, entropy does enter into the equation. You will have death. You will have decay. You will have disease. So, with that said, it's rather simple. We would much rather live in a perfect scalar energy environment and be perfectly happy, healthy, holy, as opposed to living in an electromagnetic energy spectrum in which decay is introduced and death and disease are inevitable.
I'd like to speak a little about the devices themselves that you use. I think you treat, several hundred people per day. Is it more now, or?
Actually, I'm treating close to 10,000 people a day because of the Ebola outbreak.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I want to speak about that in a minute. So you're treating several thousand people. What's the capacity? Is there a capacity?
That's a great question. If I had sufficient staff working with me, I'm sure I could treat at least 2 to 3 million people a day.
With how many devices are you using?
I'm saying just one device.
One device, okay. So if scalar energy is essentially infinite, and you've got these devices, why would there even be a limit to how many people you could treat?
That's a good point. It's just a matter of how many photographs I could insert into my instrument in a period of time. So what I envision, if finally I had the support of the world at large, if you will, all I need in order to treat a person is a photograph of a person. Well, I would obviously need help amassing those tens of thousands of photographs of people, individual photographs and group photographs. But it really is more or less a function of time and simply office work. It's really, there is no parameter, and that's a good point. Theoretically, I could treat the world every day. I could treat 7.2 billion people every day. If I could miniaturize their photographs and then just run all those photographs through my instrument, sure, I could treat the world every day.
Can you illustrate for us what do these devices look like? I can't even imagine how you could fit 1 million photographs on a device.
Sure. The device that I have, if I were to stretch it out on a workbench, it would probably be 8 feet in length. And there really are 3 components to the entire operation. Number one, I have the power unit that I call the arc. I've affectionately called it the Ark as it represents the modern day equivalent of the Ark of the Covenant. So my power unit I call the Ark. And then from there, I am able to take the scalar energy and funnel it, if you will, into Tesla coils. I have a transmitter coil and I have a receiver coil. And those coils serve to establish and magnify the scalar energy even more. And then third, I have if you will, a receptacle, another scalar energy instrument in which I can introduce photographs of people. Now, within that third component, what I call the well, in which I incorporate photographs, on any given day, I'm treating 10,000 people a day with scalar energy, and the treatment only takes me 25 to 30 minutes to accomplish. That's 10,000 people. Now, I could easily treat within a time frame of 30 minutes 100,000 people without question. So it's just then becomes a number game. If I can treat 100,000 people easily in 30 minutes, then I could treat 200,000 people in an hour. If I'm working on one shift of 8 hours, well, then I could easily treat 1.6 million people a day. Now, if I have more than one instrument, I could easily treat then double that, 3.2, perhaps 3.5 million people a day. If I break it down into two shifts, a morning shift and an afternoon shift, then you just double that number. So instead of treating 3.5 million people a day, now we are up to 7 million people a day. That's a lot of healing. And I propose that we will do that. We should do that. And that day is coming. Once I have the media behind me, Ethan, I will have the media that will take the photographs. I can't run around the world taking photographs of people. But I could easily foresee in the future, with a coordinated effort, at least 1 million people a day. At least 1 million people a day.
I spoke of the Ark of the Covenant, and there are some people who believe that the Ark actually is being kept in a monastery, I think in Ethiopia right now. And now in the Bible, it speaks of how the Ark had stricken down people who came too close to it or who were not properly prepared for it. And I know the monks in this monastery also talk about how they are prepared for a lifetime, and their lifespans are incredibly short, and they tend to go blind when at a very young age because they're entrusted to watch over this Ark of the Covenant that they say they have. Why? So basically, are you saying essentially your device is, the Ark of the Covenant is just a more advanced version of a scalar device, and why would it cause that sort of harm to the body?
I can't speak about the account in Ethiopia. I've read about that. I don't know if they have the Ark or not, so I won't elaborate on that. If the Ark is used properly, if a scalar energy instrument is used properly, it should not cause harm. Now, in the Old Testament account, yes, we do understand about the Ark of the Covenant, how the Ark essentially served to not only liberate the Israelites from their bondage in Egypt, but also it served to produce many prodigies and to convince the Israelites that their God was the one true God. I believe that my scalar energy instruments are in some way the modern day equivalent of the Ark of the Covenant. So what am I saying? Moses and the Israelites did indeed possess the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant gave off a type of energy, a type of light. And it is God's preference to work with scalar light, not electromagnetic light. Scalar light is perfect. It's directly from God. Frankly, electromagnetic light is a degradation, and it is a consequence of sin. When Adam and Eve were first alive in the Garden of Eden, they lived in a perfect scalar energy environment. That's why Adam and Eve were sinless, could not age, had essentially immortality. There could be no disease. They were very intelligent and very happy. Well, when Adam and Eve sinned, God took away their sanctifying grace, and sanctifying grace is imparted by scalar light. So by removing their sanctifying grace, if you will, by removing that perfect supernatural setting, God removed scalar energy. So we still have sanctifying grace, but not to the extent that Adam and Eve had. So my point is this. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had this perfect presence of scalar energy, and that's what made them perfect. Why was the Garden of Eden perfect? Because Adam and Eve lived in a perfect energy domain, a perfect dimension of scalar energy. Well, we've lost that perfect energy, scalar energy. It's attenuated, it's weakened. Now we only have a fraction of the scalar energy that we used to have in the Garden of Eden. So what's my point? Scalar energy is embodied in the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is a representation of God's love for mankind. And the Ark of the Covenant that I am working with really lends itself to that notion that God is trying to reconnect with mankind, to reintroduce the Garden of Eden on earth. Once scalar energy is employed, utilized worldwide, we will have a Garden of Eden once again. Not just in my laboratory. When scalar energy is utilized throughout the world, throughout the four corners of the world, we will have indeed utopia, as many people want, or paradise, or heaven on earth. That's what this is about, Ethan. It's about the happiness of mankind. It's not necessarily theorizing about energy and waveforms until the cows come home. The bottom line is to produce happiness, to introduce another way of looking at life, a better, an enhanced way of living. That's what we're striving for.
So do you believe that the Garden of Eden, the scalar environment, was created by a godly force or universal force, or do you think it was a technological force like the Ark of the Covenant, or do you have a thought on that?
Okay. I would say that when God created Adam and Eve, and this is one of the messages that I received from Jesus and Mary, this world was a mirror-like image of heaven. So if heaven is the abode of perfect scalar light, then this world also had perfect scalar light. God only wanted the best for us. Well, what happened is that with Adam and Eve's sin and the way they separated from God, that division is now apparent not only spiritually but in the physical realm, which is what? The loss of this grace from God. It's attenuated, it's weakened. Well, why? Because God has taken away our gifts, and one of those gifts was scalar energy. So I would say that God only had the best plan for us, but we ruptured that contract, we broke that contract, and now what God is trying to do is reintroduce scalar energy to the world, and with that, all the other gifts. But scalar energy is so central to our being. Why? Because scalar energy is directly from God. This is how God operates. God doesn't want to work through electromagnetic energy. God prefers to work with the perfect energy because he's perfect. Well, the perfect energy is scalar energy, and God works preferably by way of scalar energy. And in so doing, this is how God can give us his fullness by way of scalar energy. Again, if we lived in a scalar energy environment, we would have perfect minds. We would never forget anything. We would have perfect memory. We would be super geniuses. Furthermore, we would not age. There would be no disease. There would be no genetic dysfunction. We would always be happy. If you were to live in a perfect scalar energy environment, it's impossible not to be happy, because scalar energy is that life force of God. This is why they say in heaven every tear should be wiped away. Well, what's the animating principle behind that? It's scalar energy. Scalar energy is, again, happy energy. It's impossible to be unhappy in heaven. Why? Because it's filled with God's presence, which is manifested as scalar energy.
Well, I can actually relate to some of what you're saying from my own work as a healer. The most common thing that I hear back from people who I work with around the world and even locally is that their level of happiness increases. So if we do a consciousness event on one particular day over the course of several weeks, people are more uplifted and more happy. There are other impacts on physical health and otherwise as well, but happiness is the most common thing that I hear. To what extent do you, the operator, influence the work of the devices? So let's say you're in a bad mood one day, or are you even in a bad mood? I mean, is that even possible for you to be in a bad mood because you're around these devices all the time? And if you were, does that affect the function of the devices in any way?
I would say yes. My mood affects the not necessarily the function of the instruments, but my mood will be imparted with the instruments. In other words, I have an interface with the instruments. And when I'm working, if I'm in a state of elation and happiness, I'm sure my happiness is broadcast into the instruments and then on to the people. So my persona is picked up, is incorporated by the Ark of the Covenant, and then broadcast to people. So and that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. I have a ritual before I treat anybody all the time. Number one, I wash my hands. I want to be clean. I want to be pure. I'm in a state of prayer. I'm not speaking to anybody. I'm not distracted. I certainly don't have the radio on. I concentrate what I'm doing. And when I'm treating people, I am always in a state of prayer or in a state of meditation. Okay, my mind, I try to keep my mind focused so I don't wander. I always ask for a healing for the people. And that's a good point, because again, scalar energy is indeed telepathic. What I am thinking, what I am feeling will be picked up, will be absorbed, if you will, incorporated by this instrument. And in so doing, I am sending my emotions out to the people that I'm treating. That's a great point. And that's why I have this ritual. That's why I have this practice. Number one, I always wash my hands. Number two, I'm never in a rush when I'm treating people. I'm always praying when I'm treating people. And sometimes I get to the state where I can actually tell God a joke or two while I'm treating people, because I want to be uplifted. And I don't want this to be rigorous. I don't want this to be boring or commonplace. I want this always to be new and exciting. So that's an excellent insight on your part.
So it sounds like the state of consciousness or being of the person operating a scalar instrument is really important to its effect on healing other people.
That's right.
Yeah. So I imagine these devices have a substantial effect, environmental effect in the environment in which they're housed and operated. So have you noticed any environmental effects, such as plants growing better or pets or people behaving differently in the environment that these devices have been kept?
Yeah, I have a Saint Bernard, and invariably, if my Saint Bernard is with me in my laboratory, when I go to treat, my Saint Bernard will invariably come very close to the scalar energy instrument and sit next to it. I believe my dog can pick up the energy. My dog feels the energy and is very happy, and he will just sit or lay down right by the scalar energy instrument. And I don't force him. I don't coerce him to do that. He has full reign of the laboratory, but indeed he'll come up right next to the instrument when I'm working with it. And if I walk away for some reason and I leave the instrument on, he'll stay by the instrument. He won't follow me. So that's one particular case that I've noticed that yes, my Saint Bernard has a real affinity for the Ark of the Covenant. Secondly, I've also noticed that anytime next to my laboratory, I live in Florida, the surrounding area never has any significant lightning strike. It seems that scalar energy has, around my laboratory, around the general area, the local area, I should say, has seemed to in some way attenuate lightning strikes. I don't really feel that we could have a direct lightning strike on the laboratory. And it's only because it seems that some type of force field has been set up to prevent that. Again, I live in Florida. There's many thunderstorms. I actually had a thunderstorm this morning. And interesting, and I'll mention this, while I was treating, we had a lightning storm. And I noticed that my instrument started to pick up the ambient energy. And what I can call, and many experimenters call, over unity. My scalar energy instrument started to increase in power. I believe my scalar energy instrument started to pick up the energy, the scalar energy induced from lightning strikes. A lightning bolt, people, is a release of scalar energy. A lot of people have not quite understood that, but lightning is a manifestation of scalar energy. Anyway, my instrument started to experience the over unity principle, and it started to increase in power, even though I did not increase the power on my end. In other words, a scalar energy instrument can assume the energy, the scalar energy from the environment, and if there's a great deal of scalar energy in the environment, my instrument will automatically soak that in, incorporate that, and the output of my instrument will increase. I experienced that this morning with a thunderstorm. It's quite profound. You know, my instrument, which is the modern day equivalent of the Ark of the Covenant, is alive. I am working with a live energy. This is nothing that is just to be relegated to a textbook. I am working with the life force energy. That's the way I look at it. And this energy is alive. It's alive with the Spirit of God.
That's interesting what you say. One of the people we're bringing to our expo this upcoming April is Dr. Sam Osmanovich. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's the lead archaeologist of a pyramid excavation project in Bosnia. And he's been able to measure an energy that's emanating from the peak of the pyramid going out into space. And they've been able to even record some kind of an audible sound that some kind of information that's being transmitted from this pyramid. And there have been also Russian scientists who have built fiberglass pyramids and done experiments. And one of the things they found is that within 1,000 feet of the pyramid, storms will not pass over the pyramid. It'll go around it.
Yes.
So it sounds like that's kind of what you're experiencing.
Exactly. Exactly. That's phenomenal, isn't it? It's almost as if you have a hemispherical dome over your laboratory. And I do in many ways. I'll see lightning strikes all around, but lightning never will hit my laboratory because it seems that it's a benign force field that's been built up. And I would concur with that. I've heard reports about that. Pyramids are actually incorporate scalar energy. They're capacitors for scalar energy. And in that local environment, you won't have severe weather. That's true and accurate. So what does that mean, Ethan? Well, it's kind of obvious. Scalar energy has a direct influence on the weather. Why? Well, scalar energy is the cause of weather phenomenon.
Yeah, there are some theories that the various pyramids that exist around the world may have been partially built to stabilize the Earth's energy field and to prevent a major catastrophic disaster such as the flood or polar shift or so on. Do you think that there's any credence to that possibility?
I'm not in favor of that theory. I would say that any pyramid, or you could extend it to even a volcano. Volcanoes, whether they're active or extinct, volcanoes still have an upwelling of scalar energy. Any type of cone-shaped, massive structure like that, whether it's a pyramid or a volcano, is able to project scalar energy. So in so doing, what does that mean? Well, it means the local environment is really scalarized, the term that I use, or it's simply an environment that has a greater degree of scalar energy as compared to that of any other normal environment. So suffice to say that scalar energy is all around us, but you will see, for instance, during earthquakes, we have an upwelling, we have a release of scalar energy. So what's the cause of an earthquake? It's a release of scalar energy. I've seen photographs of various volcanoes, and I've seen actually scalar energy. You could pick it out in the photograph. You could see scalar energy upwelling from the volcano. Well, we have incredible phenomenon associated with many volcanoes. For instance, many volcanoes, you'll have rather unique mineral deposits. Why? Well, it's the intelligence that's upwelling from the center of our Earth and finding its portal throughout a volcano. That intelligence in many volcanoes will produce minerals that we have not seen before, have never been developed, have never been identified before. Why? It's the intelligence coming from a volcano that serves to create a certain geometry. I've seen this with so many stones, precious stones that people find in or around volcanic activity. You only can find that at this particular location. Why? Because at that particular location, you had a particular set of instructions. And those instructions created those minerals or those semi-precious stones.
Are you familiar with the HARP project in Alaska?
Yes, I am.
Now, do you believe that's an electromagnetic device or a scalar device?
It's hard to say. I don't have sufficient information. I've seen the installation, photographs of the installation, and it looks like it's from that standpoint, it doesn't seem to be a scalar setup, but nevertheless, you have to consider if it is truly at its inception an electromagnetic function, it nevertheless could convert somehow into scalar energy if they have indeed understood that principle. I understand that principle. I do that routinely in my laboratory. Nevertheless, there is an installation in Alaska. It is a massive grid-like system, if you will, of wires, and it does have a profound influence on the weather and on other phenomena. I've never been there. I can't elaborate on that, but I'm sure that what they've discovered and what they're using indeed has an impact on nature. To what extent, I don't know.
Well, the reason I asked that is because of your comment about earthquakes being a release of scalar energy, and I'm wondering if a device like that, if it were to be a scalar device, could be used to bounce scalar energy off of the ionosphere or to produce earthquakes in that way.
That has been theorized and hypothesized. I can't elaborate again on that. I have heard theories, conjectures that some of these massive earthquakes that are taking place are being abetted by scalar energy instruments. In other words, there's a potential at a certain fault line for an earthquake. And if you were to subject that fault line to a great deal of scalar energy, that it could cause some type of significant seismic activity. Is that possible? Yes. Are they doing it? I don't know.
Okay, well, I'd like to switch now to talk about health specifically. You speak in very specific terms about how scalar energy disassembles viruses and pathogens. Can you explain what you mean when you use the word disassemble to illustrate the method in which scalar heals an illness?
Sure. Let's go back to our junior high and our high school days, and when the teacher put up on the blackboard or we looked on our laptop, there's an actual chemical formula, a structural formula for anything. Well, let's consider we're looking at a microorganism, and let's consider, say, let's just isolate on 3 or 4 elements. A bacterium might have carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and perhaps phosphorus and iron. Okay, so a particular bacterium has a structural formula and has a geometry, and that geometry is assembled and maintained by scalar energy. And in order for me to act upon that bacterium, all I have to do is find my way into that geometry and to unleash, to disorganize that chemical bond. It's as simple as that. So if a bacterium has a structural formula that includes the elements carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, then all I have to do with scalar energy is to send the reverse angle, the reverse phase angle, and that structural bond will break apart, will disassemble. So when I say I can disassemble germs, I mean at the atomic and at the molecular level with scalar energy. It's not effectuated by electricity. It's a different phenomenon. Scalar energy can actually unbind or disassemble the molecular and the atomic structure of a pathogen, of a germ. And when you do that, Ethan, the beauty of it is this. Not only does the germ, the pathogen, cease to exist because you actually have changed the molecular constitution, but the toxins, the waste products inside the bacterium are likewise disassembled. So it's a win-win situation. With scalar energy, I am able to disassemble not only the germ, but the toxins inside associated with the germ.
I have sort of a philosophical question based on that. Obviously, a germ is a living thing. And so if you're disassembling it into its basic atomic components, the life force or consciousness of whatever it is, what happens to that? Does it cease to exist, or do you have any thoughts on that philosophically?
You're simply transmuting. You're changing one physical form into another physical form. So let's go back to my initial example. Let's say a bacterium has carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus, just for a matter of conversation. Once we disassemble that bacterium, then it is reduced back into its elements. So the carbon, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, they still exist, but they're not in a geometric form, that of a bacterium. So it's almost as if we have a Lego set. Let's go back to when we were kids. Well, a Lego set is just building blocks, one Lego after another. Well, you form them, you fashion them into what? Some type of configuration. That's what we do with Lego sets. Well, I'm doing the same thing with bacteria and viruses. I'm taking a finished product, the Lego set, and then I'm just disassembling the Lego set. It's no longer a virus or a bacterium. I've broken it down into its constituent parts, which are the building blocks, the small Lego set. And that, by way of analogy, each Lego set, each piece of the Lego is carbon or oxygen or nitrogen. It's that simple.
So it sounds to me from this whole conversation so far that the mere existence of viruses and bacteria that are adverse to human health are because we're living in a world that is primarily utilizing electromagnetic energy and not really tapping into scalar. Because it sounds like if such a world existed, there would be no adverse viruses, right?
That's right. I will say this. If we were living in a perfect scalar energy dimension, a perfect scalar energy force field, no microorganism could impinge upon our health. All of nature would be subdued. So that calls to mind that in a perfect scalar energy environment, there's perfect intelligence, there's no disharmony, there's no disease, because everything is in its proper place and order. I believe all of nature, every microorganism, every animal, etc., would be at peace and would be at harmony in a perfect scalar energy environment. If we lived in a perfect scalar energy environment, the bacteria and viruses and fungi that cause disease would not cause disease. They would be benign. Furthermore, if we lived in a perfect scalar energy environment, I believe you could pet a lion. I believe you could wrestle with a bear. All of nature would be in harmony. There would be no sense of fear. There would be no sense of intimidation or threat. So a perfect scalar energy environment is heaven-like. And if we were to go to heaven and with animals, well, the most ferocious animal would be docile in heaven. I'm firmly convinced of that, including a virus. Viruses would no longer impinge upon human health. Viruses would be friendly.
Now, in the Bible, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an expert on the Bible, but I believe that it speaks of 1,000 years of heaven on earth, and isn't that the time that we're entering into now?
I believe so. I think that will be only effectuated by the second coming of Jesus. I'm a Christian, and I believe that the second coming of Jesus Christ will initiate that era of peace. It will be approximately 1,000 years. I can't say it will be exactly 1,000 years, but it will indeed be 1,000 years of prosperity, peace, and happiness.
Based on everything you're saying so far, it sounds to me like a scalar environment would have to exist in order for such a future to happen.
Exactly. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you. So in other words, in order to do that, we're going to have to revisit the Garden of Eden. And as I said previously, the Garden of Eden was a perfect scalar energy environment. And in order for us to return to Eden, we have to return to that perfect scalar energy environment. Everything has to be perfected. And in order for us to have perfection where there's no disease, there can't be discord or unhappiness. Everybody has to be content, happy, intelligent, very, very intelligent. It has to be a scalar energy environment. So with the second coming of Jesus Christ, I believe God will reinstitute and bring down upon this world another glorious reign in which we will be immersed in scalar energy.
And so it sounds like really your foray into this field and bringing this out to the world is possibly the very beginning of that future, right?
What God has told me in various ways, in many messages from both Jesus and Mary, that this reintroduction to scalar energy is paving the way to reintroduce God's reign, God's divine will on earth. Once mankind can accept that and inculcate that, then we can go to the next step and incorporate it. First the intelligence, first the instructions, first the confidence. People need confidence that this is going to work. And if they have that confidence, then they'll say, okay, let's do it. Let's make the entire world one gigantic scalar energy sphere of happiness.
I'd like to speak a little about what results you've been getting with treating various illnesses. Now, you speak about viruses and bacteria and so on, but have you had any results with, say, diabetes or cancer or, say, pancreatic issues or the appendix or anything like that?
No, my work is focused on pathogenic infection. Why? Because I've discovered a technique where I can routinely and without exception break apart, disassemble a pathogen. Now, next year, 2015, I hope to be able to venture into a way to take scalar energy and to correct mutation, which would be essentially either the prevention or the cure for cancer. I believe scalar energy is the tool to correct cancer. Can I do that now? No, I don't have the ability. Do I think it's possible? Yes.
I just spoke a week or two ago with Dr. Edward Group, who's a foremost expert in natural health, and he's going to be at our expo as well. And he speaks about how intestinal health is really the key to good health, and people who have really poor intestinal bacteria or intestinal health tend to have serious illnesses and so on. So the whole immune system, the strength and integrity of the immune system is really dependent on the intestinal strength. Is that an area that you've done any work with regard to scalar energy, or is that outside of your realm at the moment?
That's outside of my realm, but how do I practice that myself? It's called fermented foods. Some people like yogurt, some people like pickles, some people like sauerkraut. There are many foods out there that you can eat that will help with that intestinal flora that you need. There are good bacteria, as you well know, people. I would highly encourage people to eat well. As a general rule, Ethan, I do not eat junk food. I'll put my hand up to God and take an oath to that. I do not eat junk food. Fruits and vegetables are just fine by me. A little bit of red meat and fish. So I won't get off the beaten path, but by all means, I would encourage people to eat fermented food because you're going to get a lot of your probiotic bacteria that way.
So if a person gets a scalar treatment, are the effects permanent? Like, for example, let's say someone had, and we're going to talk about Ebola in a minute, but let's say someone had something like Ebola, for example. Is the effect long-lasting or permanent, or is it just it affects the cure? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are they somehow impervious to getting that same illness in the future? Is the effect something that lasts, or does it just cure the issue then, and then they can just as well get it again?
People can get reinfected. Now, let me explain what I'm doing. Presently, I have the ability to treat out to disassemble over 40,000 species of germs, pathogens. And in so doing, it's a rather consummate, what I call a pathogenic cleansing. If you can imagine, any given day, I treat people for viruses, bacteria, protozoan, and fungi. Over 40,000 potential species of germs are targeted or identified to be disassembled and eradicated. However, you can become reinfected within a week, within a couple days. Why? Germs are everywhere. So what many people will do with me, they'll sign up for a 1-month session and they'll have their bodies cleansed, pathogenically cleansed. And then maybe 2 or 3 months will go by and they'll say, I've been reinfected, either the office place or school, or somehow I picked up a series of germs. I don't feel well. And they'll once again come back to me, more or less as a maintenance program. So and many people are now following that rubric, if you will, that to go under this scalar energy pathogenic cleansing every 2 months or every 3 months, they feel to be prudent as a way of addressing reinfection.
Okay, I'd like to switch to a more timely issue. In recent months, you've obviously heard that there's been an Ebola outbreak going around, and the mainstream medical community is apparently working on a vaccine. And I've learned that recently there's been successful treatment of Ebola using some natural means, and I've spoken with a scientist down in Florida, actually, who has developed an herbal treatment that has been successful. I guess I understand that you've been extremely successful in treating Ebola, which obviously a lot of people don't know about. And so I'd like to know, can you elaborate on some of the actual cases in detail and tell me what happened and how long the treatment was applied to produce the results and so on? Anything you can elaborate.
Sure. Once again, let's start off with this notion. Scalar energy allows us to control physical matter. With that ability, I can disassemble physical matter, including viruses such as the Ebola virus. So what am I doing? I'm taking my scalar energy instruments and I am disassembling, I'm breaking apart the Ebola virus. Well, as a matter of record, everybody on U.S. soil that was infected with the Ebola virus, or everybody who was airlifted from Africa back to the United States for the Ebola infection, everybody without exception, I've treated for scalar energy. And everybody without exception has been cured of Ebola and released from the hospital. Why? Well, I don't want to diminish anything from the medical community and their excellent care, because to treat Ebola and to take care of people who are infected with this hemorrhagic fever virus is involved. It involves really a team approach. And again, I only have high regard for the medical community. Nevertheless, I believe my scalar energy treatments were instrumental in breaking apart and disassembling the Ebola virus. Now, if you will recall that everybody in the United States that has been under quarantine for Ebola has been released from the hospital. All the Americans have, according to the medical community, been cured. Many people have also been aware that viral load tests have been conducted. A polymerase chain reaction test was conducted in which there was no sign of the Ebola virus left in the people that were at one time infected. Well, a viral load test is a PCR test is a highly vaunted, a rather accurate way of adjudicating whether we have the virus present or not. So my point is this. I believe my scalar energy treatments serve to break apart, to disassemble the Ebola virus in these Americans. If you recall that many of them did not experience any type of hemorrhaging, once they were quarantined, their recovery was a stable yet steady recovery. Not one of them, again, has experienced any deleterious effects such as organ failure, hemorrhaging, or even excessive diarrhea. Why? Well, by that time, I had secured their photographs. I was able to go on Bing and Google, and I heard that these people were suffering from Ebola. So I took their photographs and I inserted them in my scalar energy instrument, and I started to treat these people. And my track record thus far is excellent. If I can start treating people for the Ebola infection prior to hemorrhaging, before they start bleeding internally, the chances of survival are very good. And it's my contention that this was the first round of testing, of experimenting with my technique. Obviously, Ebola doesn't happen every day. I have been able to successfully, in my opinion, disassemble the Ebola virus. Now I'm going to extend that. There was a British nurse. His name is William Poley. He was airlifted from Africa back to Great Britain, and he too was suffering from the Ebola infection. I treated him because I could secure his photograph from Google. Likewise, there was a nurse by the name of Teresa Ramos who contracted the Ebola virus while attending to a sick and dying, if you will, priest in Madrid, Spain. Likewise, I was able to intervene in Teresa Ramos's case in Madrid, and at one time she was in critical condition. But thank God I secured her photograph quickly, and I could start treating her as soon as I heard about her case. And in so doing, she likewise has been released from the hospital. Well, all of these cases pinpoint one common denominator, and that is scalar energy treatments. Now, let's face it, this strain of Ebola has a mortality rate of at least 50%. Well, everybody that I treat for Ebola, provided I can start treating them in good time, they don't die, and everybody has survived. So, what is the cause and effect here? Why are these people walking out of the hospital, and most of them never have any serious complications associated with the virus? I believe scalar energy is the answer. I believe scalar energy has intervened and has served to break apart, to disassemble the virus.
Now, I know you have very strict rules on treating people and that you never treat anyone without their consent and permission. So what prompted you to treat these individuals without even knowing who they are?
Sure. And that's a great point. Usually with my website, I mandate that people give their full consent before I treat them. I want everybody to be informed. In this case, it was my doing, and I take the squarely on my shoulders. It's my responsibility. I intervened, and I treated these people without anybody asking me and without their knowledge. Looking at the track record with Ebola and how it carries a mortality rate of at least 50%, I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to intervene. And the only analogy that I will offer right now is this. If I see somebody drowning in a pool, and I have the ability to jump in a pool and pull them out and save them from drowning, I'm going to do that. And that's essentially what I did with these people with Ebola. They were in harm's way. And we know from our experience with Ebola that as this disease progresses, our health is compromised. And again, there is a mortality rate to consider. So I took it upon myself to treat. Again, that was my unilateral decision. I am only to be held accountable for that, nobody else. I go on record. I think I did the right thing, and I will continue to do that. I hope people will start paying attention to what I'm doing. It is of merit. Take a good look at this, people. Why is it that every American has walked out of a hospital after being infected with Ebola without any serious complications from the viral infection, as opposed to some people that I cannot treat, and those people really go through the throes of this infection, and subsequently 50% of them, if not more, die.
Has anybody actually had Ebola and actually approached you for treatment?
No, nobody has.
What kind of other illnesses have you been able to treat from people who have actually come to you for treatment?
I'm really getting such a great response from people for all types of infection. Just 2 days ago, an individual contacted me, and the individual said, "I've had herpes infection for years. And I feel great. I no longer have the symptoms of herpes." And to back that up, to substantiate that, this individual has submitted to a diagnostic test, a viral load test, a PCR or a polymerase chain reaction test. Well, this viral load test came back negative for the herpes virus. First time ever. No detectable trace of herpes. Well, that's happening a lot now, Ethan. A lot of people are going. I highly recommend people get a PCR test. It is rather accurate. It's a way of ascertaining whether you have the genetic presence of a bacterium or a virus or a fungus, etc. And it will tell you whether you're infected or you're not. And invariably, many people who get these PCR tests report back to me that there's no longer any detectable trace of the pathogen. In this case, the herpes virus seems to be eradicated. Again, this individual has not had any manifestations, any symptoms of the herpes virus now for months. The first time for years. This individual's been infected with herpes for years. So what does that mean? Well, it probably means that scalar energy treatments are serving to break apart, disassemble the herpes virus. And I think we can do that with all pathogens. Scalar energy, people, puts us in the driver's seat. We control germs. Germs don't control us anymore. We are in the driver's seat. We can break apart. We can disassemble a germ. So we now have mastery. We have control over microorganisms.
We spoke earlier about how scalar energy has the ability to affect our mood and our level of happiness and so on. Have you ever actually intentionally used scalar to treat psychological issues, say a fear of heights or water or anything like that?
Not directly, but indirectly, almost perhaps coincidentally, my scalar energy instruments seem to have a profound effect for many people on their emotional state. And yes, some people have gone as far as to tell me that scalar energy treatments have served to correct their phobias or to help them overcome some type of an addiction. Some people have gone as far as to tell me that scalar energy has served to reverse or in some way address depression or anxiety. Some people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder have told me that, yes, they too likewise feel better, a greater sense of calm and tranquility after these scalar energy treatments. So all of that is very telling. It's not per se what I'm doing. Rather, it's what this intelligent, this divine energy can do. I believe scalar energy can indeed correct the conscience of man. And in so doing, I believe scalar energy has a profound effect, a direct effect upon our 7 chakras.
Now, are you familiar with some of the indigenous centenarian cultures around the world, such as the Hunzins? Have you ever heard of them?
Yes.
Okay. So the Hunzins, for people who are not familiar, live well into their 90s and some over 100, and in exceptional health. They don't get cancer, very, very rare cases of cancer or diabetes or anything for that matter. And even at 100, they're performing physical tasks that most Americans couldn't do in their 40s. So do you have any explanation on why they are able to do that at such and have such a long lifespan?
Excellent question, and it's really broad-based throughout their population. This is not just a few individuals. So this particular group of people, I understand there are a number of factors. One of the factors that we can consider, they live at the base of a glacier, and it's been said that they drink glacial water. And I'm sure that glacial water has a lot of minerals and properties to it that helps, that abets their physical constitution. Is there something specific about this group of people that they live in a scalar energy environment? I think we probably have to turn our attention to that effect. Yes, there has to be. I frequently have pondered that, and there are set populations out there where you really don't see an incidence of disease. You see them to be very healthy and robust, even at advanced ages. People who are octogenarians in their 80s and 90s, that they're still healthy, they're vibrant, and they, as you said, they can perform physical feats that most people in their 80s and 90s could not perform. Well, obviously they're eating well. I'm sure they are, and their water is probably crystal clear, glacial water. But it would have to speak also to something to the fact that they live in a more perfect scalar energy environment, and because of that, they are not susceptible to disease, and they are much stronger. You just can't attribute this just to glacial water or to a favorable diet. It has to be most likely some type of scalar energy presence that we've missed, that we don't quite understand.
Are you familiar with the China study? Have you heard of that?
No.
Well, the China study was the largest study of nutritional effects on the body ever done, and it was a project that was jointly done between the United States, China, and other European countries. So, and it basically it surveyed, I think, 97% of the population of China. So it was quite a large population that was studied. And what it found was that the longest living, healthiest people lived primarily on a plant-based diet with very little consumption of meat or dairy. Why do you suppose a plant-based diet leads to optimal health? Is there any scalar energy explanation for that?
I would say I think that's rather obvious. Plants are obviously incorporating scalar energy, and they are embodied, if you will, this life force energy. I've often wondered that myself. I try and eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I believe these products of nature are, if you will, scalarized. I believe there's a great deal of scalar energy and scalar potential, and that remains to be seen. But I would concur, and I've studied that too, and it seems that throughout the world, whether it's the Mediterranean diet or some people are on a paleo diet, it seems you have to go back to the ground. You have to go back to nature. Plants, yes, any plant phytochemical is obviously going to be beneficial to you. Fruits and vegetables really should be your mainstay. I try not to eat too much meat, but I would say for many people, and I can't recommend this for everybody because everybody has different dietary strictures, but yes, fruits and vegetables, I advocate that. And I myself try and observe that on a daily basis. And I would say the science behind it is probably because these fruits and vegetables have incorporated a great deal of scalar energy that we just don't understand. And we are, in many ways, when we eat fruits and vegetables, we're eating sunlight. And that is going to be beneficial. If that's a new branch of nutritional science, first of all, you have to admit that scalar energy exists before you can admit how it has an advantageous effect upon the body. That day is coming.
Yeah, I used to, for a couple of years, I used to sun gaze every day. Familiar with sun gazing?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I used to actually go out a couple of hours a day in the morning and in the evening and do that for about 2.5 years pretty consistently. Obviously, from our conversation, that's a scalar energy that's coming from the sun. And I assume that there are people in India. Actually, I brought a sun gazer, a very famous one, from India to the United States a number of years ago. And he had, at that point, gone 7 years without eating anything and drinking very minimal amounts of water. So it's a scalar. So assuming that we have this 1,000 years of heaven on earth where we're living in a scalar environment, it sounds like we probably won't have to eat anything, right?
That's a great point. And I've often pondered that. And from what I've understood from mystics, yes, you're right. In the era of peace, what I understand, we will all go back to having a plant-based diet. If you want to eat, you'll eat fruit. Okay? There will not be any meat eating. Why? Well, all of nature will be subdued and friendly. And you will not see how animals will be vicious anymore. And it's said in the Bible, how is it that the lamb and the lion can sit down together and be mutually cooperative and friendly? Why? Because both the lamb and the lion will be grass eating, will no longer have a carnivorous appetite. And that extends itself to people. People will no longer have to kill animals to eat, to survive. So this heaven on earth that we're approaching, it will be perfect harmony. Every creature will be in harmony. There will be no fighting. You won't have the law of the jungle as we have now. There will be no predatory animal, any predatory species left. We will have nothing but a Garden of Eden. And that extends itself, obviously, to our ability to live off the grace of God. I believe scalar energy will allow us to survive just by getting our nutrients from the sun. We won't have to eat. I don't think we will. I think that some people today, I know there have been some mystics that have been able to survive without eating. I come from a Catholic perspective. Some mystics have said that all they need is the Holy Eucharist to survive. That's fascinating.
Now, you mentioned earlier how scalar energy actually disassembles or breaks apart pathogens, viruses, and so on, and also toxins into their basic fundamental atomic elements, right? Am I on the right track?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So these days we live in a very toxic environment if you live in any kind of westernized society, and there is fluoride in the drinking water, chemtrails that are being sprayed in the sky, and genetically engineered foods and so on. Does scalar energy have any effect on these environmental toxins in a way that they would break them down into a more inert, basic element?
Yeah. What I've observed with my scalar energy treatments in general is that anytime I'm broadcasting scalar energy into a person or an animal for that matter, it seems to detoxify automatically. In other words, if it is not of nature, if it is a man-made chemical, scalar energy seems to have the intelligence to automatically start breaking down to disassemble toxins, man-made chemicals in the body. I've also, my predecessor, Galen Hieronymus, who worked with scalar energy in farm fields and ranches, etc., he had the same benefit. He would insert a scalar energy instrument on a farm, and automatically it seems that the chemicals, the pesticides, would start to break apart, would start to disassemble. Meaning what? Well, a scalar energy instrument on a farm will automatically disassemble pesticides. To what rate, I don't know, but this was his observation. It's not of nature. It's not of God. So what is a man-made chemical vis-a-vis scalar energy? Well, it will be disassembled. It will not coexist with scalar energy.
Now, I've heard you speak about how scalar energy can be used to produce vitamins in the body, and that's very interesting that you are working in that area. Can you explain a little about how that works, and how do you? I think I've heard you say once that you have been able to successfully produce vitamin C, for example, in the body, and I'm wondering what are the mechanisms that you utilize to make that work, and how do you know that you're really producing it? Have you done blood tests or something like that?
Sure. Once again, scalar energy is intelligent energy. You can control scalar energy to the point you can tell scalar energy to form a specific molecular structure, in this case, vitamin C. Now, how does that work? Well, let's look at the body. The body is composed of elements. We have carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. We have iron, magnesium. These elements pre-exist in our body. And what I do with my scalar energy instrument, I tell the elements of the body to configure themselves, to arrange themselves in a specific molecular form. So if I wanted to tell the human body to actually assemble vitamin C. In practice, I would do this. I would take a magnified photograph of vitamin C, usually at the crystalline level. It would show the crystalline structure of vitamin C. Perhaps the magnification might be 100-fold or 200-fold. And at that level of magnification, a scalar energy instrument will be able to decipher the molecular code of vitamin C. So I actually place a photograph of vitamin C inside my scalar energy instrument. Again, it's a magnified photograph of vitamin C. And then the intelligence from that photograph, which is indeed the geometry, the molecular structure of vitamin C, that intelligence is imparted into a person. And once that intelligence enters into a person, then it instructs the human body to likewise to assemble vitamin C. So how does it go about doing that? Well, again, there are elements that are readily available in the human body: carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, magnesium, sulfur, zinc, etc. And scalar energy will simply start picking out those elements and assembling them into the molecular structure of vitamin C. It's much like if you bought a pallet of bricks. Many of you have been to a brickyard. Well, when bricks are delivered to a construction site, they're just obviously bricks that serve as the building material for a house, a factory, etc. And once you take that pallet of bricks and then you assume a specific structure, there's a geometry obviously to it, an intelligence is imparted, then those bricks are no longer separate building blocks. They form what? A cohesive whole. Well, likewise, scalar energy takes the building blocks of the body, the elements, and then assembles that into a geometry, an intelligent design. And what do you have? It renders vitamin C, or any other vitamin or mineral for that matter. So vitamin C is the upshot, is the result of a scalar energy instrument instructing the body to assemble from the elements, which are the building components, to assemble from the elements into a more sophisticated geometry, which in this case is vitamin C. It's quite profound. It works. How do I know it works? Well, people have subsequently, after the scalar energy treatments, submitted to a blood test. And many of them tell me that their blood analysis has never been so favorable. Where they were lacking, had a deficiency in vitamins, minerals before, they no longer have that deficiency. And many people have told me that they feel so confident in what I'm doing, this nutrient program, that they feel they don't need vitamins and supplements and powders. Now, I don't advocate that, but I have had some people who've had such favorable results with my scalar energy treatments have been able to go off their supplements altogether. Notably, just this past week, a woman sent in a testimonial. She said for years she had muscle cramps and that she had to supplement her diet with some type of magnesium. Well, she tested my program, and to the point that she's no longer taking any type of supplements, including magnesium. And she has found that she's not had any muscle cramps whatsoever, that she can actually walk a long distance without cramping up. And now that's a good indication that in some way the scalar energy nutrient program is working. It's serving to indeed assemble the necessary minerals, antioxidants, phytochemicals, etc. in the body, to the extent that this woman who's had muscle cramps for years is finally now pain-free, no longer has this episodic event of muscle cramping. And she attributes it in large part to the fact that scalar energy is indeed assembling the nutrients that she needs at the cellular level. And to the extent that she could finally no longer take any type of supplements, no longer augment her diet with any type of vitamins, minerals, pills, protein, supplements, it stands to reason that indeed something is happening. I believe the favorable outcome is indeed that scalar energy can assemble nutrients at the cellular level, all done by way of light instructions. It's just phenomenal what this energy can do.
Well, we were talking earlier about how there are sun gazers in India, for example, who, and possibly in the U.S., but I don't know of any of them, but there are ones in India who have been studied for long periods of time and observed by medical doctors and scientists to try to understand how it is that they can go for years without eating or drinking hardly anything. Well, actually, there's one guy who's been studied pretty extensively who hasn't even had anything to drink since he was, I forget, I think around 7 years old, and he's clearly in his 80s or something like that, 70s, 80s now. So, and they were able to validate that he, in fact, his body actually seems to produce all of its nutrients, and it does not actually, it seems to absorb whatever liquid it needs from, it basically just recycles everything. And more science is starting to point in the direction that our friendly bacteria in our body can actually synthesize any nutrients that it needs, assuming the body is in balance to begin with. So the use of vitamins and so on may not be necessary. So it sounds to me like you're hitting on something that even that the body really is there's more like an alchemy going on in the body, where the body can produce whatever it needs, provided it has the right kind of, in this case, scalar energy or to manufacture that.
I believe once we really understand scalar energy and the mechanism behind it, that we will finally understand that the body has been transmutating on a frequent basis, on a regular basis. Transmutation is the process of changing one physical form into another. I believe we do that automatically. I believe all biological life does that, but we haven't just yet pinpointed how that happens. Yes. Is it possible? Yes. Are there some people who can sun gaze and in some way assuage their need for food and drink? Yes. Is that intelligence? Is that instructions from the sun, scalar energy, that allows them to in some way mitigate their diet? Yes. Do we quite understand that mechanism? Well, we're beginning to. I think our attempt to understand scalar energy and its profound effect upon all biological life is really a favorable step forward to identifying that indeed transmutation takes place, and that yes, many people are afforded that ability, that they can in some way cut back on their daily intake of food. I have found myself that in many ways the Scalar Energy Nutrient Program is so strong right now, and I think it's so effective that in many ways I have, if you will, mitigated my need for food, diminished my need for food. I'm 54 years old. I'm kind of a big guy. I'm 6'7". I'm about 250 pounds. I need food, obviously, to survive, but I recognize that many days when I'm on the nutrient program, I don't have an appetite. And I would attribute that, in part at least, to the fact that I am receiving nutrients at that very moment by way of scalar energy. And those nutrients satisfy my appetite, satisfy my need for food. So essentially my brain triggers to the point of saying, no, you're not hungry. It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. Many people are reporting favorable results similar to what I've just spoken of.
Well, I think what's very exciting and interesting about everything we've been speaking about today is your vision for the future. And we talked in biblical terms of the 1,000 years of heaven on earth and how that's most likely a scalar, or it has to be a scalar environment.
Yes.
And I'm seeing what this actually happening all over the world in different ways. We had another presenter at our expo last year, and I've done an interview with him. His name is Lloyd Muir, and he actually discovered frequency numbers, and he has numbers. Basically, just repeat these numbers over in your head, and they produce certain results, such as heal various illnesses, and some are for certain vitamins and so on. So I'm seeing, and that's very interesting. He seems to be coming at it from a little different approach, but obviously these are all heading in a similar direction, because he's able to produce a change physiologically using simply a number. So, okay, great. Now, I know that you don't really get into the area of cancer and so on, but I am curious about, for example, GMO foods, because there's some concern and some science to validate the concern that genetically engineered foods may be altering our intestinal bacteria DNA, which ultimately majority of our body is made out of. And so if bacteria in our body is changing genetically, it may be altering our own. It basically is altering our DNA. And it seems to me, though, that scalar, if it's of God or a universal energy, that if it is in a person's environment or physical body, or the physical body is tuning into it, the body should naturally restore to whatever is its optimal state. And so it should essentially rewrite any genetic,
yes.
But that's not, is that an area you are focusing on, or that you are treating, or have any?
You're nothing short of a genius, Ethan, and I mean that in all sincerity. And you're very astute. You understand the potential here. Scalar energy should allow us to reprogram the human body, including the genetic code. Now, I am not there yet, people. I need help, and frankly, I need wisdom from God. My contention is this. If I continue to sophisticate and empower my scalar energy instruments, subsequently, I'll eventually have a strong enough standing wave of scalar energy in which I will be able to reprogram any mutation. A mutation is what? An addition, a deletion, or a substitution of a base pair. Well, it's my contention that scalar energy is the intelligence, the divine intelligence, as you have put so appropriately. And with scalar energy, we should be able to reprogram the human body, including mutation, including any type of genetic disorder, genetic dysfunction. So what am I saying? Ultimately, with really strong scalar energy instruments that are very effective, we should be able to cure or prevent cancer, and we should be able to cure many genetic diseases. If we can reach into the DNA with scalar energy, and we can, why? Scalar energy, first and foremost, assembles all DNA, and scalar energy then maintains DNA. Now, there are outside factors, the environment, food, chemicals, radiation exposure, that will alter our DNA code. Well, in order to correct that, it's just like reprogramming a computer. You simply put in the correct intelligence and you reprogram, and in so doing, you have, once again, a perfect program with a computer. Well, if you can do that with a computer, if you can do that with information systems, then you can likewise do that with the DNA, the genetic code of the body. And what is the great divine reprogrammer? It's scalar energy. Scalar energy will allow us to reprogram the genetic code. So yes, touche to you. I believe that day is coming. We're getting close to being able to take scalar energy to reprogram a mutation, so it's no longer a mutation, it's no longer neoplastic tissue. And furthermore, we should be able to take scalar energy and reprogram genes that are dysfunctional, genes that are showing disorder.
From that standpoint, do you believe now, if we were to replace conventional electromagnetic energy in our homes, power lines, cellular, Wi-Fi, and everything else, with a scalar version of energy to transmit data and to power our homes and everything, would this effect automatically have a healing impact on all illness, preventing all illness from occurring in the world, basically, and possibly even lengthening lifespans?
Yes, I would say so. Let's say we would have the favorable outcome someday of replacing all electrical appliances in our home with scalar energy appliances. So our home would be nothing but one gigantic battery, a capacitor for scalar energy. Living in that environment would be much more conducive, would be life enhancing. It's my contention, and many people are very well aware of this, that living in an electromagnetic environment sometimes does indeed cause disease. Well, they're correct in that assumption. I've always thought that electromagnetic energy is imperfect energy, whereas scalar energy is perfect energy. So if I had my druthers, everything that I use today would be powered by scalar energy, which is the pure life source energy. It's the first energy of the universe, whereas electricity is really a degradation of scalar energy. So yes, a lot of people complain that their homes are polluted with too much EMF, too much electromagnetic frequency. And in so doing, that background radiation causes them perhaps headaches. Some people feel that they have sensitivity to too much electricity. Some people say that they have to step away from their computer because it's simply too much energy. Well, it's the wrong type of energy. It's electricity. If a computer was powered by scalar energy, not only would people not ever walk away from a computer, they'd always keep it on. Because a computer would be broadcasting, would be radiating scalar energy, which would be life-enhancing.
And so basically, scalar is a combination of electrical and magnetism. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, all energy originates as scalar energy from the stars. That's why the very core of a star is so unique. It's a different dimension. If you really look into the center of any star, it's a purely scalar energy environment. It's perfect. And that's the perfect motif, the perfect paradigm, the perfect prototype of the universe. But once scalar energy starts to leave the core of any star, then it starts to break down in many cases into electricity and magnetism. So all energy originates as scalar energy. The center of our sun and the center of every star is the point of origin for scalar energy. Now, sadly, as that energy starts to broadcast throughout the universe, it does indeed break down. The scalar double helix, if you will, decouples into electricity and magnetism. And that's the energy that I'm not in favor with. Sadly, in this world, the electromagnetic dimension predominates. But again, if I had my druthers, this entire world would be scalarized. There would be nothing but scalar energy on the face of the earth. And in so doing, we would indeed have a perfect environment. So in synopsis, a scalar energy force field is perfection, whereas an electromagnetic force field is really the sign of decay, death, and really is the beginning of our downfall.
Do you believe, well, I think you're going to obviously say yes, but I'd like to maybe get a little bit more elaboration on this. Obviously, if you believe that the Garden of Eden was a purely scalar environment, and Adam and Eve had immortality, essentially, if we're headed toward a scalar environment in the future,
yes,
and if we had a home where all of our devices were scalar devices, I would imagine that means that we are heading toward a future of physical immortality.
Yes. And that's what I understand from many mystics and prophets of today, that this new era of peace, and I believe this new era of peace will be initiated by the second coming of Jesus Christ. And this new world, this new heaven on earth, if you will, and one of the consequences will be that we no longer live in this electromagnetic environment. We won't, period, have the electromagnetic environment, which is imperfect energy. God wants us to be perfect like him. So after the second coming of Jesus Christ, yes, indubitably, we will have a scalar energy environment. Nothing but scalar energy will exist on the face of the earth. Amen.
When we look at the story of Jesus and how he was able to rise from the dead, and obviously this is just theoretical, but I'm curious if you believe that was somehow he was able to harness scalar energy to reanimate his body, or, I mean, what, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. I believe Jesus is God, so he commands scalar energy. He's the creator, and as the creator, he can do anything. But I will say this, during the ministry of Jesus Christ, there were many miracles that he performed that cannot be explained readily, but we can explain it now if we understand scalar energy. For instance, Jesus frequently could heal people by touching them with his hand. Well, obviously, as God, he controls scalar energy. God would never work against creation. Why would God create something and then work against it and deny it? No, he doesn't. So anytime that Jesus would place his hands upon somebody, the principle in motion, if you will, the animating force is scalar energy. God, Jesus, would impart scalar energy to somebody. It is said that Jesus could transmute water into wine. That was his first miracle, his first public miracle at the wedding feast of Cana. Well, water is H2O, and in order to change that into wine, he actually transmuted that liquid water into wine. Well, how do you do that? You do that by way of scalar energy. So God is always working in conjunction, in harmony with nature. He never works against nature. Frankly stated, if I can transmute vitamin C in the human body by way of nutrients, then Jesus can transmute water into wine. It's all done, it's all effectuated by scalar energy. Another example is when Jesus was in the boat with his apostles and there was a terrific storm, and Jesus abated the clouds and the winds subsided. Well, scalar energy is responsible. Scalar energy forms, assembles clouds. Scalar energy is responsible for wind. When you have a movement of scalar energy, it picks up the air molecules and the air molecules move with it. Well, when the air molecules move, that's wind. Now, if you look at our jet stream is really a river of scalar energy. And have you ever asked yourself, why does the jet stream exist? And what's the animating force behind the jet stream? And why does it move in that one particular direction? And how is it that the jet stream can be 200 miles an hour or perhaps even faster? The jet stream is a movement of scalar energy. Scalar energy is moving in a specific pattern. It's a river, if you will, of a stream of scalar energy. And when scalar energy is moving at such a rapid rate, it picks up what? Air molecules. And in so doing, that air becomes wind. That's the underlying cause of our jet stream. Let the mystery be solved once and for all.
Your explanation kind of brought to mind how Native Americans had the rain dance that they did to change the weather, and there have been some theories that moving in a vortex pattern in a group holding a certain intention actually can alter weather patterns or other things, obviously. So it sounds like maybe they could very well have been working with that as well. And so basically, my understanding now is that Jesus or probably other healers who are to some degree or another, when you're doing a healing, you are essentially putting scalar energy into that physical body, and by doing so, you're basically connecting that body with a scalar environment, which just restores that environment to in balance with the universe, which would essentially heal whatever illness, I would imagine.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Where do you see the future of the world going? A lot of people, especially those of us who are revolutionaries in these various movements toward a different future. Some of them stand on one side of the fence and some on the other. Some believe that we really haven't gone far enough and we still can fall behind, and others believe that we have moved beyond the point of no return toward a very positive future. Do you have any opinion on where the future looks?
I do. I always have confidence in man. The glass is always half full. It's never half empty. I know that God is always guiding us. God is always with us, and we simply have to unite. If this world unites, there's nothing that can stop us. The real key to our downfall is that we fight too much. That's been the anchor. That's been the millstone around our neck. For all the past 7,000 years. We fight too much. There's too much squabbling. If mankind will unite and we put aside our differences and our ego, gosh, there's nothing that 7.2 billion people can't do. A unified world can accomplish anything.
We talked earlier about the solar flares and how solar energy, and when there's a coronal mass ejection, it is actually potentially altering our DNA somehow. Now, we are at this point at the beginning of a 26,000-year cycle, and we're at that pivotal point of crossing over the galactic equator as well, and as a result being bombarded even more intensely by the whatever radiation is coming from the center of the galaxy than we have been in previous years or decades or thousands of years. So in theory, it sounds like really we are, if that's true, based on what you're saying, that we may be being impacted with even more of a scalar energy environment than we ever have, and we could be evolving as beings, both on a cellular as a soul and a soul level. Does that make any sense?
I would agree. We have a long way to go. God's perfection for us is not being realized in this world. So I would say that any scalar energy from our sun or from the stars should be accepted and incorporated into our bodies. That's God's way of imparting light. Without the sun and the stars, there would be no light, there would be no intelligence, and we would not have human life. Frankly, without scalar energy, the universe would fall apart. It would become nothing but chaos. So I think it's very prudent to welcome the forces of nature. I do. I obviously work with scalar energy on a daily basis. This is nothing to be obviously intimidated by. Sunlight and starlight should be welcomed by everybody. Obviously, you want to temper your exposure to sunlight in the summer. That's obvious. But nevertheless, these are forces of nature. And the more we accept them and the more we work hand in hand with nature, that's going to be the key to overcoming so many problems. I look at the energy crisis that we have today. Well, to go about solving the energy crisis by way of the electromagnetic spectrum is essentially impossible, because you always have to deal with scarcity. There's always pollution, degradation, and it's just too hard to manage. Whereas scalar energy is an infinite source of energy. There is no scarcity. It never pollutes. There's never any degradation. And a scalar energy environment is perfect. Whereas an electromagnetic energy environment or a chemical environment is not perfect. So I look forward to the day that we can, if you will, replace so much of the electromagnetic world as well as the chemical world with scalar energy.
You mentioned that you speak regularly to higher beings, Jesus and Mary and others, and that they impart wisdom that you utilize in your work. Have you ever been told as to what are the forces that have brought us in the last many thousands of years to a world that's been in quite a dark place?
Yeah, it really, in a nutshell, there is a devil. Satan does exist, and 1/3 of the angels in heaven followed him. So essentially, out of all the angels that God created, 1/3 are now against God and against his creation. It's their folly, it's their mistake. But there is a spiritual realm, and that spiritual realm does indeed have an adverse effect on human behavior. Whether we realize it or not, there are good angels in this world and bad angels. And all of us have a guardian angel. I'm convinced of that. And that guardian angel protects us, watches over us, educates us, and helps us. But nevertheless, there are demons, there are fallen angels, and those angels have had a profound effect upon human nature. And in many ways, they inspire evil people to do evil things. So at the root of it all, we have to look at it from a spiritual standpoint. The way we act is carried out, and what we perceive as being the truth sometimes is not. In other words, the evil dimension, Satan and his followers, the demons, can indeed confuse mankind. And that confusion is still apparent and obviously rampant today. So it's always been this clash, if you will, between good and evil. I see that in the future that we will not have this evil presence. I understand with the second coming of Jesus Christ, Satan and his followers, the demons, will be cast into hell. They will no longer be able to manipulate us in this world. And again, whether we realize it or not, many people are manipulated by Satan and his demons.
When we spoke a year ago, you had mentioned that you had the aspiration to transmit scalar energy, I think, 1,000 miles to light up a building.
Sure.
And so how far have you been successful in transmitting scalar energy to light up light bulbs, for example? And you did actually show me yesterday in your laboratory, you were holding a light bulb in your hand, and it was actually lit up from the scalar device you had in the room. Right. So obviously I can see that you've been successful in doing that. but to what distance have you been able to do it, and when can we expect something of a more massive scale where we could transmit across the country or 1,000 miles?
Sure. I can readily illuminate a light bulb in my bare hand in my laboratory. So that proves to me that scalar energy is indeed a means of power generation. Scalar energy can be used to illuminate objects. Now, one of my goals is in the future, I would like to broadcast scalar energy at a distance to light up a building, say 200, 300 miles from my laboratory. I think that's possible. I think that day is indeed coming. And when I can indeed achieve that, I think it will have a great consequence for the world. If, in a nutshell, if I can deliver scalar energy to a distant location and illuminate an object, we will no longer have the constraint of the grid system. Obviously, in order to get electricity into our home, first we have to start with a power plant. Then we need transformers to take that energy over telephone wires, over cable, and ultimately to deliver it to our home through a series of wiring networks within our house. Well, it's my contention that we will not need to do that if we can discover how scalar energy can be transmitted over a long distance wireless transmission. So in essence, what I'm saying is scalar energy is the power plant of the universe. We no longer will need a power plant. The grid system is the atmosphere. It's the ether that pre-exists. And the ability to deliver energy to any location, well, you simply just have to broadcast scalar energy and direct it, per se, to that location. So do I think that day is coming? Yes. I believe that Jesus and Mary have asked me repeatedly to work on a method in which we can deliver scalar energy at a distance by way of wireless transmission. In particular, there is a building in Clearwater, Florida, that has the image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that building in Clearwater, Florida, has been selected by heaven as to be the first example of scalar energy transmission. Now, do I think that's possible? Yes. Am I working towards that goal? Yes. I'm not there yet. Frankly, next year in 2015, I have to further understand how scalar energy is working and perfect my technique. I'm sure Jesus and Mary will provide me the insight, the wisdom, in order to carry out that design, that project. So my prediction remains that in the future, I will be able to use scalar energy and broadcast it from a distant location to the building in Clearwater, Florida, that has the image of it's Our Lady of Guadalupe on a window pane. And in so doing, I'll be able to light up that building with an incredible display of scalar energy. That day is coming. That's in God's hands right now. There's only so much I can do. I'm a mortal man. I don't have infinite intelligence, so I'll rely upon God with his infinite intelligence to instruct me. But mark my word, that's one of my goals, and I think we will achieve that. Hopefully next year, within God's perfect timing. I would say sometime in 2015, later in the year, that's my goal.
Yeah, we're looking forward to being a part of one of those demonstrations as well at some point. Now we have a gentleman at our expo this April who his name is Ken Chorley, and he's going to be demonstrating telekinesis on stage. And I imagine that scalar energy is the foundation or the medium through which telekinesis or any telepathy, those kinds of things, also work. Have you ever tried to animate an object using scalar energy?
I agree with you. Telekinesis, telepathy, call it clairvoyance, all of that is an example of scalar energy in motion. The scalar energy is the animating principle behind telekinesis, telepathy, clairvoyance, prophecy, etc. I have not had success in working with scalar energy to that degree. I have noticed that I am able to experience, if you will, some episodes of deja vu. In other words, when I'm working in my laboratory, I will have a particular notion that something is going to happen in the future. And indeed, eventually that does happen in the future. In other words, Scalar energy is responsible for the flow of time. Scalar energy is the cause of time. And I believe when I'm working with my scalar energy instruments, in some way I'm seeing into the future. In some way I can experience future events. And when I actually do indeed walk through those events at a later date, experience those events in person at a later date, it all draws reference to my work with scalar energy in my laboratory. Now, let me make this clear. Scalar energy, again, is the cause of time. And if you look at a scalar wave, once again, it's a double helix. And it's very simple. As scalar energy rotates in one direction, time moves forward. If you were to rotate scalar energy in the opposite direction, you would go back in time. So my point is this. In some way, when I'm working with scalar energy in my laboratory, I am getting a glimpse of future events. In essence, that's prophecy. And I have experienced now, to a greater extent, that the more powerful my instruments are, then the more of the gift of prophecy perhaps I have, or the experience of future events that I have seen by way of scalar energy. So to put that in synopsis, my scalar energy instruments are allowing me in some small way to experience the future.
A lot of people don't know that Nikola Tesla actually wrote, I believe, at least one book that was very spiritually based. Have you read that book?
I've not, no.
Okay. But it seems like quite possibly because he might have always been that way, obviously, to be able to have the brilliant ideas that he had. He probably was also a very spiritual man to begin with, but it sounds to me from what you're saying that scalar, that working in a scalar environment might very well raise your consciousness or your connection to something that's not of the physical dimension.
That's right. Exactly. That's well put. When I immerse myself in scalar energy research and I'm working with my instruments, I always feel elated. I always feel upbeat, almost to the point of being able to laugh. And I would say it is indeed this energy that has a profound effect on not only my physical body, but on my psyche. Scalar energy serves to make me happy. And it really is a state of bliss. I'm convinced that heaven, again, is a state of unmitigated scalar energy. Hence, we have unmitigated bliss. We have happiness beyond belief.
You mentioned that you had a book coming out. What's the book going to be about?
The book that I'm writing really is emerging, if you will, of the scientific world and the spiritual world. I want to be able to show people how simple the universe is, how God created, obviously, the spiritual domain as well as the scientific domain. And again, I want to see these two walk hand in hand. Both science and religion are traveling partners. Sadly, today there's too much division. There's too much of this dynamic between scientists and theologians. There should not be. There is no division. God created both. Both will complement one another. They should be traveling partners. So the book that I'm writing, in essence, should at least give people the comfortable feeling that science is religion, religion is science. God has created a very simple universe. It's profound what this universe can do, but at the root of this, of all of this, we see the Creator who's guiding everything. And I want to give people confidence that we are called to be participants in creation. In many ways, we are called to be co-creators with God. Not that we'll ever be God, but God wants us to live this life in its fullest capacity. So that, I believe, that type of notion, I think, is behind the book. And again, it serves to give people confidence. That's what I really want to achieve. Give people confidence in God, the Creator, and that God is willing to work with us, and He wants to work with us on that intimate level.
Where do you see your work going in the future, your personal mission, future goals, long term?
I would say that in the future, I would like everybody to embrace scalar energy. If the world would embrace scalar energy, perhaps I would retire and do something else, Ethan. My mission then would be complete. To be quite frank, people, Scalar energy is just waiting for people to embrace and say, yes, it exists. Let's do something about it. Let's make this a better world. There's only so much I can do. I'm the cheerleader right now. Okay, so I'll be the cheerleader. But eventually I want people to dig in. I want people to accept this. And once the world, again, embraces scalar energy, this technology will change the face of the earth. Scalar energy will catapult mankind forward.
Have you been told when seeking spiritual guidance that you will achieve that in your lifetime? Is
Yes.
that okay?
Jesus and Mary have promised me that the acceptance of scalar energy is coming very soon. I would say within no longer than the next 3 years. That soon.
And do you have any concept of by when in the future we'll be living in a world where majority of the devices and our technology are powered through scalar energy?
I would say within the next 10 years, I would say the majority of our devices would be powered by scalar energy. It will be that sudden, and people will accept it that quickly. And it really comes down to first acceptance, and then ultimately when people see the benefits and how easy this is to do, and how we finally can address scarcity from a financial and economic standpoint, scalar energy will almost force the world to give up, to say no to fossil fuels and to other types of nuclear power, etc. It just doesn't make sense. It's no longer going to be a feasible economic model to work with electricity, to work with nuclear power, to work with hydrothermal power. It will be outdated very quickly.
Now, obviously, we are living in an oil-based economy and a currency-based economy. So you're talking about quite a dramatic shift to switch to a scalar-based, well, not really economy, but basically a world that is going to be powered through scalar devices and so on. Those kinds of economies cannot exist. So do you have a concept of, or have you been told in terms of, will that shift? Obviously, that shift is going to be pretty difficult for most people, unlike people like us who are already part of this conversation, but the majority of people who are still living in a very conventional mindset and world, I would imagine, are going to have a tough time adjusting to that if it's going to happen in 10 years. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, scalar energy, and what the last series of messages that Jesus and Mary have given me, God is very sad and disappointed in the inequality in this world. Scalar energy will represent abundance for everybody, not just abundance for the elite, for the few. And Jesus made it very clear to me that he gave us resources, but those resources are now being controlled and manipulated by a small group of men. Ostensibly, they're rather evil. Well, that's not God's will. And in order to circumvent that, God is going to introduce scalar energy to the world, which is an energy of abundance. It's an infinite supply of energy. And in so doing, from that point forward, the world will now no longer have to deal with scarcity. And we all will have the means to control the physical world. Now, yes, indeed, this is going to replace monopolies. And that's already been predicted. God has already made that very clear to me. Scalar energy will mean the downfall of many monopolies. But God doesn't want monopolies. God wants everybody to flourish, not a few people, not just the international bankers. So what I'm saying today is indeed somewhat prophetic, and I'll go on record by saying that. The day is coming that scalar energy will liberate mankind, and we will no longer be beholden to people like the Illuminati. Scalar energy will break the backbone of the Illuminati.
So where can listeners find you or get in touch with you or get involved in your scalar energy projects, and if they need for health benefits or anything else, what would be the best way to do that? And when is your book coming out?
My website is selfhealgo.com. I've written 200-300 articles about scalar energy. I'd really be honored if you would read some of those articles and then share with me your thoughts. Again, the whole point is to introduce this incredible energy to mankind. And the book is in the works right now, Ethan. Probably next summer it will be available in print. So I'm going to say we're still a good 5 to 6 months away.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking so much time to speak with me today, and we really went in depth into the subject, I think, and I loved some of the insights you shared with me. So I'm looking forward to what you have in the future and being a part of that if we can.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you so much.
Just a pleasure.
Thank you.